climate activism looks a little bit different this year. In light of the coronavirus pandemic, students are continuing their school strikes online rather than taking to the streets in the hundreds of thousands. But despite these setbacks and the lockdowns, they remain committed and determined to raise awareness about the climate crisis. Joining me now are 4 students from around the world who, in spite of the lockdowns, are enthusiastic and really committed to continuing the conversation. Seth, you've been to climate strikes before, where thousands have gathered in the streets. How do they compare?
They're not in the numbers like they were before, and it's not really like a sense of community like it was before, so it feels different. The atmosphere is different.
And Mitzi, you've been organizing strikes in the Philippines for a while now. You started last year. When the pandemic broke out, how did you react, and what was your plan of action?
We were in the middle of planning for our big April 24 strike when the pandemic, when the quarantines were announced, and we were trying to figure out if it will actually be quarantined during that time, because back in March, we didn't know what would happen in April. And so it's so hard to plan, even just a month ahead, because you won't know what's going to happen with everything. So we were just so surprised. We were scrambling, trying to think of plan A, B, C, depending on what kind of situation we'll be in. And then in the end, everything just had to be online.
Yeah. And Elsa, through your activism, you shed a light on how climate change impacts marginalized communities and different racial groups. Do you think the pandemic brought more attention to issues like this? And how are you using your platform to address this right now?
Yeah, so living through COVID-19 in the United States, we can see a large disparity in who is impacted by this virus compared to other communities. And in high disproportionate rates, they are Black communities, Black and Brown communities, and communities with limited access and resources. And that is the same thing that we will see with climate crisis and the issues and crisis that brings on its own. And so I think this crisis has highlighted already existing issues, but also gives us a pathway to look into how climate crisis will impact us down the road and now. And so currently my focus as an organizer and as an advocate is to bring awareness on how culture intersects with social issues. And so I do that mainly by trying to bridge gaps and lines between random things that don't seem interconnected to climate change. And I do that through just talking to people and political education, and I'm on Twitter a lot. I just tweet and just working with kids behind the scenes.
That's really wonderful. And Bianca, you're in Hong Kong, and of course, last year, a lot of the climate strikes were canceled or postponed because of the citywide anti-government protests. Do you think students your age have lost hope, or are they still as determined as before to continue with their campaigns and with their activism?
I don't think there's a loss of hope. Rather, there's, I guess, a change in priorities, in that right now people don't think that the main concern is worrying about climate change when there are many other issues in the world to worry about. And I guess the pandemic is definitely one of them, and the social unrest in Hong Kong last year was another of them. But I think that especially among young people, there isn't a lack of hope. It's just rather a case of bad timing, and it doesn't have to halt completely. And there were still, I think this time last year, there was a climate strike.
How do you think the pandemic has shifted the way that young people will continue to use their platform or continue their activism with climate change? Seth, do you want to go first?
I mean, I think a lot of the activism would be through online stuff, so social media.
I'd say the pandemic has forced us to relook at how we view community and how we hold people in community, because we can't get together, we can't organize, but I can still reach people. And how do we do that? I think that's something that we have been given a chance to rethink.
And Mitzi?
If we had to look for a silver lining, because we were all forced to go online, we were able to forge these international connections. Look at this call. This wouldn't have happened in a normal day, where we'd be able to hear stories of activists from all around the world across different time zones. And this is something that I've really gotten into during this quarantine period. I've been connecting with so many wonderful activists and from different countries, and it's something that we really need to maintain these relationships. We need to build upon these relationships and maintain these connections, because in the end, we do need a united youth across the world to solve this global pandemic, the climate crisis.
And Bianca, what about you?
In addition to everything being shifted online, our school has like a yearly climate action day, and that is generally hosted in the spring. So we obviously couldn't experience that as a school community this year. It was optional, and I think there was a lot less engagement within the community. So I definitely think there are positives and negatives to having everything online, because online also means optional. And adding on to what Mitzi said about like the silver lining and all of this, it kind of sifts out like who really cares about this and who really doesn't. And obviously we need everybody thinking about the environment, protecting the environment.
Thank you guys so much for joining us. Good luck with everything, with your activism and with your campaigns. We really enjoyed having you here today.